Hello YouTube, this is Robert Ness 816 and I'm coming at you with another video. This time it's going to be a comparison between the DW-5600c versus the DW-5600e. So I have the current DW-5600e with the 3229 module. So this is the most current module. Before this one, there was, I believe, a 1545 module. That one had a calendar that only went up to the year, I believe it was 2024 or something like that. This one goes up to the year 2099. So this one is a much more, I guess, future-proof module. Maybe it was 2050, something like that. So, all right, so let's get into the comparison here. So here I have two much older G-Shocks. They look very similar because I pretty much put current 5600E bezels and straps on them. You have to modify the bezel and strap in order to fit, and even then it's still not precise because the bezel screws here kind of pinch the bezel a little bit, and it makes the center part of the bezel kind of bulge out just a little bit, but you still have access to your buttons. So you can see they're all still very easy to press and everything. And if you compare it to the current watch, you can see that the buttons protrude about the same, so you really can't even tell the difference there. So I have both modules of the 5600C. I have the newer one here with the 901 module, and then the older one here with the 691 module, so you can see that. So the main differences that I can tell are the screens on them. The older one has a slightly clearer screen. The newer one has a little bit of a grainy like background. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is. But that's the main differences there. The batteries are also different. This one takes a 2016 battery like the current 5600E takes, and the older one takes a, let me see, I need to get it out of here just so you can get a, this one is a 2320 battery is what the 691 module takes, and the newer one takes a CR 2016. So a little bit of a difference there in battery size. I'm not sure why Casio did that between these two. Maybe there was a different chip supplier that they came out with where the newer module has a more efficient chip design, or maybe the screen's more efficient. I'm not really sure what the thought process was behind that. So what I'm going to do is basically compare the new one versus the old one. So the main difference is that the new one has a fiber reinforced plastic case. So this is a very strong plastic that Casio uses. It can still break, but it's still very strong. The older one has a case that is completely made out of stainless steel. This is not machined. It is like a cast stainless steel, and then it is just roughly machined where the bezel fits over the case, and then the bottom part is machined just to kind of make it look a little bit nicer looking. The older one is actually a little bit better. You get a nicer polishing on the, or nicer finishing, I should say, on all the surfaces, including the cast parts actually. So the older ones are a bit better. These, you can kind of tell that Casio was really trying to pump these out of the factory because the casting on these is pretty ugly. On the plastic ones, though, the molding is basically perfect. There's no molding lines, there's no nothing. It's just a nice clean mold. So when Casio switched to a plastic case for these, what they did was they beefed up the area where the band fits onto the watch. So instead of being an 18 millimeter lug width, it's now a 16 millimeter lug width. And these areas where the band fit onto the watch are basically beefed up, as you can see. The area between the lugs and the crystal is actually a thicker plastic as well. And also the screws that Casio uses now are shorter and also wider, so you get more surface area. My cat's going to make an appearance in the video. There's also going to be shorter and wider, so you get more surface area in the resin here. The older watches, Casio had an issue with these screws actually snapping off over time, and that was because the resin on the case here would actually rot away, and that would cause the screws to kind of snap off with just basically using a watch and bumping it around stuff and whatnot. So these are a very thin threaded screw, whereas these are a wider threaded screw. Not only the head of the screw, but also the threads as well. So Casio made a number of improvements in the case here when they switched to plastic. Now also, when you do get a metal cased square like this, basically it's just a metal version of the plastic case. So all the improvements Casio made to the plastic are also incorporated into the newer screwback G-Shocks as well. So as far as the module goes, if you compare the 901 module to the current 5600E, you can see that the screen on the older one is actually a little bit better defined. I think this has something to do with the electroluminescent backlight, possibly. You can see if you look at it dead on, basically the older one has a just a clearer look to it. If you hold them up to an angle, I would say they're both about even as far as that goes. I mean, the viewing angles on both of them is pretty much the same. So this one might need to have its battery changed there, because I've had this one for 7 years. It just has a new bezel and strap on it, but if you look at it there again on an angle, there's really no difference there between the two of them. Alright, so the big difference is the backlight as well. So you look at the backlight on the old one. I'll turn the light off so you can kind of see how bad it is. So that's, I mean, it's not terrible, but it does the job of illuminating the watch in poor visibility. So this is the 901's backlight, and then this is the 691's backlight. Pretty much the same thing. Better than your Casio F91W, that's for sure. Much better. So, and again, the 901 here. So, but then we have the illuminator right here, and they switch the lights or the buttons around. So that's the electroluminescent backlight. That's the whole reason why. And also, I think if you leave your finger on this one, it'll basically stay illuminated for as long as you want. So nice little feature. So if we go through the features of these watches, you can see here it actually looks similar now that the light's off. I don't know. Tell me in the comments which one you think is better, the older one or the newer one as far as visibility goes. But we'll go over the features because they're basically very similar. So we'll see, you basically get the, and it's funny too, this one says Saturday and it's supposed to say Sunday. Should fix that. Oh, look at that, look at that. See? It says the year 2021. What happened there? There we go. That should be good. Now it's this Sunday. Whoops. So a limitation with these, with the older modules, is these only go up to the year 2030. So the date on these is going to become inaccurate, basically, because the calendars aren't going to update correctly. So these in a few years are going to be basically useless. except for the time. So just keep that in mind. This one, 2099. So who knows what's going to happen in 2099. So let's compare the modules as far as features go. So you get your alarm. So both watches allow you to set the hour, the minute, the month, and the day. You can do that with this one as well if you want to. I just have it blank, so basically it'll serve as a repeating alarm. And you turn the alarm on the old one by hitting the light button. And you can see that it's cycling through the different modes. So now I'll just leave the hourly chime on, and this one right here is more or less the same thing if I wanted to. So as far as the alarm goes, same thing. And we can go to the timer. Dual time, which is a feature that the new one does not have. So dual time is basically you can set the time up for 2 different time zones there if you're traveling. So here's your timer, where you can set up your hours, minutes, and seconds if you want. And then we'll go to the stopwatch. And one thing that's interesting is that when you go to the stopwatch on the new one, you have your time displayed in the stopwatch menu. You do not have that with the old one. So that's an advantage for the newer module. And then we'll go back to the main screen, and that's basically it. So another thing is too with the new one is that when you cycle back to the main screen, there's a difference in the beep tone, whereas this one you don't have that. The newer watch also has a louder beep tone compared to the old one as well, so that's another advantage. The new watch has a beep signal. So basically that's what that is. So every hour now the chime will go off and the screen will flash. Or if I wanted to do, say, set up the timer and have just the seconds going off here, just to give you an example of what it does. And I'll just cover it up and hit start. And you can see how the light flashes. So that's basically what that does. So say if you're in a loud environment and you can't hear the buzzer going off, you can just kind of look at the screen and you can tell it's going off by looking at the, light flashing there. Turn that off. So as far as the battery life goes, both watches are going to, Casio says the new one lasts 2 years, but this one's going on 7 years with the original battery. Casio rated this one at 7 years. So I would say both watches are going to be about 7 to 10 years, depending on how much you use the features of the watch. In my opinion, you'll probably get 7 to 10 years, say, on the current modules, even though Casio says that they're only good for 2 years. So figure 10 years, give or take. As far as build quality goes, so the newer ones are made in China or Thailand. This one is a Chinese-made watch. You can see in the back, I believe the newer ones are made in Thailand with the economic issues that everybody's having. The differences between the two of them is that the watches made in Thailand do not have that little symbol on the bottom, and also from what I can tell is that the watches made in Thailand have a better strap, because the strap that's on this one is from Thailand. So this is definitely a more pliable strap, and this is a strap from China, and it feels similar, but I think it's just a little bit more pliable with the Thailand one. The buckle's also different too with the Taiwanese straps too. You can see how they're a little bit thicker, so that could be a recent improvement that Casio did with these. Just something to look out for. From what I can tell also on some of these, the backlight is either green or blue. I don't know if that has to do with where they're made or not, but that's just something I've observed. Same thing with these older ones. Rarely you'll get one with a green light in the back instead of a regular white light, so just a little thing to take note of. These are both made in Japan, like everything used to be back in the day. So as far as another feature goes, this one has a rem feature, which is useless in my opinion. So that's all that it does. So basically that's if you need to remember something, you just look at that and go, oh, that's what I forgot. But I don't see the purpose in the rem feature at all. I just think it's something that they threw in there. What else was I going to say? So as far as the differences go, other than that, there's pretty much nothing. You can look at the cases. There's a little bit difference here in the fonts and whatnot. Durability wise, they're both going to be the same because I've bounced this watch around, I've thrown it, it's basically fine. The old bezel and strap were looking pretty worn out, which is why I replaced them. And you know, it's really not an issue with the plastic case design. It holds up just as well as the older stainless steel cases. There is a little bit of a difference in weight. It's really not that much, believe it or not. As far as wearing them both on the wrist, they're both very comfortable watches. And that's pretty much it. I mean, if I were to choose one, actually, I would just go with the current 5600E because the older ones are fun for nostalgic reasons, but they're getting really expensive now, and the supplier that was making aftermarket bezels for these, I don't think they're making them anymore because they're just not, I don't see them on eBay as often. As far as modifying a current 5600E bezel to fit this, it's really very simple. I'll probably make a separate video on that. The strap also needs to be modified as well, but it needs to be done in such a way that the strap stays firmly onto the watch because there is a 2mm difference in the strap width here. So the new strap can slide backwards and forwards, but if you do it the way that I do it, basically it stays firm and it doesn't move around. So that's pretty much my video on the 5600E versus the 5600C. And if I had to pick one, I would go with the current one all day long because basically they're readily available, they're dirt cheap, pretty much the same watch with improvements except for the dual time feature, which if you use it, it's whatever. I mean, setting the time on one of these things is really just, all you gotta do is push the adjust button and that's it. I mean, it takes 3 seconds to do it. As far as the adjust button, yes, it's supposed to be recessed. They do that because there is not a time delay on this particular watch as far as adjusting the time, so that's why they do that, in case you bump the watch into something, whatever, and push the button by accident. You know, you don't have to worry about that with it being recessed. This watch right here, for example, doesn't have that, so I have to hold it in for it to go into the settings menu. So pretty much why Casio does that on all their lower end G-Shocks. The 6900 is basically the same thing. So anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Tell me what you think in the comments. Which one do you like, the C or the E? Which one's better?